from my perspective is that because of this massive influx of high energetics that the earth is getting, that people are generating every time they meditate or connect and expand more deeply or get into groups and do the same, it's happening all over the planet. Very slowly, the nature of what we call the structural aspects of, say, atoms or matter, what have you, is very slowly undergoing a transformation. And it's happening, I believe, in our bodies, and it's happening outside of us as well, because there's a one-to-one correlation between the behavior of everything outside of us, the environment that we experience, and the energetics that we emit as living conscious beings as well.
Guy here, welcome to my podcast. Matt is waving in the background. I'm here in Sydney. We're just getting ready for a full day workshop with Live and Flow, of course, where we take people through meditation, sound journeys, but more importantly, set up an infrastructure to help them connect to their true selves, which is what it's all about, holding space for others. Anyway, I digress. My awesome podcast guest today is David Clements. And this is a very deep down the rabbit hole conversation. He's a physicist. Don't let that put you off, or if you're into more of the spirituality side of things, on the science side of things, he breaks it down phenomenally. And I love his analogies and the way he explains things about this field of information. And it's great to have authorities like David talk about these concepts in depth as well, which gives obviously a lot of credibility to what we know is actually happening anyway. We see it in your all the time in these spaces that we create through our one-day events and our retreats. But it's great to have validation from people like David as well. Enjoy the podcast. If you're obviously somewhere in the world, please be sure to let me know in the comments below. If you're watching on YouTube, where you are in the world, say good day. And there's links below if you want to find out more about where we are as we continue to get this work out around the world as well. We are going to be in Croatia. Our September retreat in Australia is sold out. Our January retreat in 2026 in Australia is already a third sold out. It's only been open 4 days, which is phenomenal. It's so good to see all this coming, moving forward. There's also some free resources there as well, obviously, if you can't make the events. Much love from me. Enjoy this podcast with David. It's awesome. David, welcome to the podcast, my man.
Thank you for having me on. It's a real pleasure. Thank you for asking me. I'm really excited to get going.
No, it's deeply appreciated. And it's always the same. We've been chatting off air for 10 minutes and I think, right, this is gold. I must start hitting record so we can capture it for everyone. But
it's like, stop talking. Let's just record it.
Totally. And I certainly want to get into your origin story a little bit today and introduce you to, my regular listeners. Somebody actually put me onto you a few months ago, flicked me a YouTube video of yours, and I was like, oh, who's this David guy? So I'm always kind of keeping one eye. And mate, and what you've been sharing and the topics that you're diving into resonated with me deeply, and I thought, right, I have to reach out to David and see if he'll come on the podcast. And what I love to do is ask people when they come on is as simple: if you were at an intimate dinner party and you sat next to a stranger right now and they asked you what you did for a living, how would you respond to that?
I'd say, I guess better wait for dessert, I guess. No. I would say, well, where to begin? I guess at the beginning, when I was very young, I've said this on many different interviews, and I was very completely, in no way would I be considered adept at mathematics or physics at all. Didn't get it, didn't understand it, wasn't interested at all. I literally went to remedial mathematics class lessons when I was younger because I just was so disinterested, But I was very, very interested in all things going up. And I was fascinated. I loved the stars, loved astronomy, loved looking and gazing and wondering who's out there, what's it all about. And something kind of clicked in me. I got to high school, I didn't do so well at high school. I just spent most of my time daydreaming out of the windows and being in my own imagination. I just didn't like it at all. But something had a switch around. And then suddenly I had this sort of switch on where I became very adept at abstract mathematical ideas and concepts. I just really started to turn on and get it. And at that point, still very interested in everything sort of to do with the stars, other races, that kind of thing. And went to university and felt that, I there's a particular course I want to do. They just introduced this, and it was a double degree, a degree in mathematics and physics bolted together into one. So I was doing all the courses of mathematicians and all the courses of the
Wow.
physicists. And everybody thought, dude, like with your background, I'm not so sure this is a good idea, And I said, no, I really feel like I need to do this. And I really rocketed. I just devoured it. I loved it. And I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to peel back the boundaries of reality, understand how that this is all put together, how it all works. I loved it. And I was really heading into this area of being a mainstream theoretical physicist. And so that was where I was. But in tandem with that, I was still very interested in everything, to do with people coming forward with different experiences and, having, all sorts of crazy information, amazing information about, encounters, having worked at different places that these people were and the things that they were bringing forward, like the Bob Lazar guy. It was crazy. And I'm sure a lot of people will remember that from I think it was the late 80s, early 90s, that stuff started, coming out. And yeah, but I had no idea of the idea at that point of a higher self and inner self, multidimensionality, all the kind of things that float around in a lot of the conscious community, you might say. And so I was moving forward, and then I went to Cambridge to do something called a Master of Advanced Study in Theoretical Physics. So it was super intense course. There's a massive dropout rate on this course, and I just loved every bit of it, and I wanted to keep doing it. Then went to Oxford University to start my PhD, or a DPhil as they call it there. And I really wanted to study string theory, which is a fundamental particle theory where particles are vibrating or oscillating strings. And, there's greater frameworks about how the universe and everything sits together within there. And when I first started, I thought, great, cool. This is exactly where I wanted to be. I'm really in the place to, pull back those veils and have a little look underneath what was going on. And then slowly into that, I started to get the feeling, I thought, this isn't really heading in the direction that I thought it would go. I don't feel that I'm actually peeling back these veils. In fact, I'm just getting more questions when I'm trying to seek answers. And it isn't really feel like it's actually going anywhere. So there was a period where I felt a little bit despondent. And I thought, okay, so I then started to look online and search for things that I was interested in, energy, vacuum, the particular keywords. And I came across the work of someone called Lieutenant Colonel Tom Bearden, who, if you haven't heard of him, I'm sure many in your audience will have heard of him. He is a legend in my view, amazing guy who used to be in the U.S. Army, and another chap called John Bedini, who is in the US Air Force. And they were building these amazing devices that were attempting to get energy from the vacuum and use it. And so I got the honor of working with those guys. And Tom was great because we had a great friendship together. And I was so stoked that he got back to me, because I thought, I'm just some research student, often, I didn't think he was going to get back to me, but he did. And that really was my first step into, I guess, what I would now call living energy physics. And we can talk a bit more about that. But to sort of cap off my entry into the conscious world as well, at that point, a friend of mine bought me a book because he knew I was interested in everything going on up there, that covered a lot of different subjects, including ESP, or extrasensory perception, particularly remote viewing. And when I read this and I saw that these professional people, and there were actual programs run to train people to remote view and to view data remotely, and they were highly successful, I thought, whoa, people are actually doing this. I thought, this is cool. So I excitedly hopped online to see if anybody was, offering courses or doing anything like that. And I found this company, which at the time, from what I remember, one of them was one of the people that was involved with some of those original programs. And so they send you this box kit of videos. You go through the tutorials, and you start to self-train, basically. And I had this, and I wasn't too sure if this was going to work. I was a little bit skeptical going in, and had this incredibly profound first experience where in remote viewing, you have a photograph of the target that you're trying to. You don't look at the photo; it's in an envelope, so you have no idea what you're looking at to stop you from interfering with the data collection. And there's just a series of numbers on the back, which the person who would look at the photo will consciously assign those numbers as sort of like an address, if you like, of the target. So when you look at those numbers in a superconscious type of way, when you start to key in on those numbers, it associates the target with those numbers. So you can then start to move around and collect data on the target. And so I had this, I went through the protocols and started to move into the center, and then started to hear this immense rumbling and vibrating in my ears, and like this fluid that was moving up and down my body. And it was very visceral. This wasn't kind of just a very subtle, oh yeah, I think I can feel something. It was really rumbling. It was not, soft at all. And it was a bit unsettling because it's like, whoa, what is going on here? Put my pen down, and I went to have a conversation with a friend of mine who's in the kitchen, and the sensations, the sensory data of these experiences kept going on. And it took about 10 minutes for it to subside and just settle down back to like normal me, so to speak, And after that, I went into my room again and opened the envelope, flipped it over. It was a volcano. And so for me, the feedback, the correlation between what I was getting and what it was I was viewing was, okay, this is definitely something is working here. And so that was really the start of my opening, in a way that really sort of kicked on the intuitive aspects of my consciousness into high gear. And as time went on, I started to put remote viewing aside because I became more aware of and interested in the higher self aspect, the multidimensional aspect of us as living beings, and started to really launch into that area. So that's really how it all kind of came about.
I find it fascinating, and listening to you share your story. When you were, deep in the trenches of studying the mathematics and the physics and everything, is it at that point everything theoretical, just the mental mind, or are there elements of where you're getting feedback that there is a fabric of life or consciousness, however you want to term it, intertwined with everything? Because sometimes we can fall in love with the idea of these things, but it's all just data. It's not experiential, like you spoke about with the remote viewing and things like that.
Well, that's a great question, and that really ties into my interest now in to do with living energy physics, because the way I would describe conventional physics, and so people sometimes ask me, so have you just completely just don't do any physics at all? I still use mathematics. I still write software, because of the research I do. I still use a lot of the facets that I learned there as tools. But what I understand now is that the approach that mainstream physics, or let's call them scientists or whatever you want to say, try to see the universe and its inner workings in a very linearized, sort of dead way. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is, it doesn't see energy or energetics or consciousness as being living or have any kind of living qualities to them. They're simply like Lego blocks that have particular attributes that come together in particular ways, make macroscopic objects, which then in turn behave in particular ways, as if it's just a matter of breaking down that linearized mechanical concept of what is not, how does it work. So as everybody will know, there's a fairly good degree of accuracy when it comes to structure that mainstream physics has a good deal of things to say. But that really only applies to the structural qualities. It doesn't really apply, in my view, to the deeper understanding of what is behind the structure. It's like saying, if you take a vast ocean, completely still, nothing, and then suddenly these small ice crystals form within the fluid of the ocean and then come together. These structures come together, and because they're now crystalline, they have a very, very particular quality of attributes about how they function, how they bump into each other. It no longer behaves as the fluid medium that they have been created within. And so, in other words, when you look at them, and if you just look at them and not the ocean, you think, there's structure. See, I can write formulas, I can map that, I can work out different qualities and attributes of behavior. Look, I'm really onto the truth now. I get this. And that is, in a nutshell, in a very playful way, the way I see mainstream physics approaches things. But I had this experience in John Bernini's lab when he had one of his machines running, that the energetic environment, the sensorial environment when I walked into that room went off the charts. And when you left the room, even though there were no doors on the opening, there was nothing stopping anything from coming in and out. You could just walk in and out. This energy seemed to be behaving as if it was keeping itself in the room. And it wasn't metal. It wasn't like a Faraday cage, people thinking, it wasn't like that at all. It was wood. It was, apart from maybe a couple of nails here and there was no metallic, material inside it. But you could really feel the massive upsurge as you walked into the room and the densification of the drop in energy when you left. And when I replicated one of John's machines and made it back in my house, I saw exactly the same thing. When I walked out of the room, it dropped down. When I go into the room, it elevates. And it's as if the environment itself becomes just, I hesitate to use the word charge because it might get confused with electrical charge. But there feels like there is this imbuing in the environment, the air, just the environment itself of this energy that literally seemed to respond in a conscious way. You could sit down and meditate and interact with it. There was a living, conscious interactivity with this energy that was being generated. And so what I realized was then, I had a long period of sort of trying to use, a sort of mathematical approach to try and break it down, because I didn't understand the way I understand things now. And it kept going very flat, and eventually, my higher self, which I was very much aware of at that time, and other teams that would come in and work with me, very advanced consciousness that would come in and work with me, kept saying that you have to let go of the idea of trying to structuralize and mechanicalize, what it is that you're seeing, because it is more fluid in nature. It has a living quality to it, and it doesn't behave in the ways that you are used to, controlling and calculating and putting all these formulas together. And eventually I got that after a lot of frustration and head banging. I said, okay, I see, I get it now, And what they were saying is that what we perceive as structure and the very sort of specific qualities of, say, atoms, molecules, other things, how they behave, a lot of those qualities come from the high densification of the energy being compacted down into this form, which looks like a solid particle, or a clump of solid particles making an atom, and clumps of atoms making molecules and DNA, and so on and so on and so forth. And so there is this sort of process which I see happening from my perspective, is that because of this massive influx of high energetics that the earth is getting, that people are generating every time they meditate or connect and expand more deeply or get into groups and do the same, it's happening all over the planet. Very slowly, the nature of what we call the structural aspects of, say, atoms or matter, what have you, is very slowly undergoing a transformation. And it's happening, I believe, in our bodies, and it's happening outside of us as well, because there's a one-to-one correlation between the behavior of everything outside of us, the environment that we experience, and the energetics that we emit as living conscious beings as well. So I don't know if you had any questions. So I've done a whole big unwrap there. I don't know if you want to tell me.
No, I wanted to ask the question around that, because when you were describing that and, walking into this conscious field of energy, it was a very tangible, and then you would walk out of the room. My initial thought was, what is that vibration, that elevation in frequency actually then doing to our biology, our bodies? Yes. At these frequency levels, and then is that tying into an ascension process of us being able to work with different levels of consciousness per se?
Yes. Well, what I would say in my experience and my perception is that working with these types of energetics, you get to understand that what's happening is that a sort of veiling is getting pulled off. So our limited veil perspective of seeing everything as mechanical dead structure is changing, where we understand what is underlying, or like the ocean example, where the crystalline balls that don't seem to do anything but just bounce into each other and do very limited things, they come from almost a living sort of fluid-like type of energetic, which can create, compress, expand, do all sorts of things, but it is a living consciousness field. And so in that way, to me, part and parcel with what people call ascension is these veils of limited perception coming off and you moving into a center where you have such an extended, expanded perception of reality, how fields, fluid fields, living conscious fields work, and how they can compress themselves into what appears to be dead mechanical structure, is coming open. So that opens up this whole realm of a completely different perception in people, where they can see things that are so vastly different from what they're used to, currently speaking. Very odd things, or what appears to be very odd things, that people are already seeing them. Strange, sort of almost plasmic like streaks of light, odd experiences when they suddenly feel this presence come up in with them when they meditate. Lots of little things like that are continuing and just happening in greater numbers. And it's all going to change into, I feel, in my view, an experience where this world, where literally the matter itself is going to change. It's going to become less dense. The veilings that compress them down are going to loosen up. There's going to be an apparency of a luminescence that comes from matter. And I don't know how long this is going to take, but I always think back to the stories of, say, master beings that were here that always seem to have this sort of effervescence glow off of them, because they had this state of being where their literal bodies had elevated and expanded, and the veils had come off to such a degree that it literally looked like they were glowing, you know. And so I believe that is where humanity is being given the option to go to. So it does involve, there is this coalescing between what we consider physics or, energy science over here, and living energy science and consciousness. It's actually all the same thing. I consider physics just to be a view of the very condensed, very veiled aspect of matter, which itself actually comes from living fluid consciousness that creates that condensation in the first place. So, it's all intertwined. There is no separation between them, so it's all a matter of seeing it from a very whole point of view, rather than just that or just this,
Totally. And how much then would you lean into that from your own direct experiences and your evolution is giving you that deeper understanding? It's almost like you know where to look because of your direct feedback and experiences that you've been having on your own ascension journey, on your own elevation through this work.
Yeah. Well, what I would say is one of the key aspects to this is my connection with my higher self. And I'm very clear about that with everyone. I would encourage, the central, most important thing is every day connect with your higher self. Even if you don't feel anything, you don't think anything's going on, your intention to open up and access to your high dimensional self is really vital for ascension, in my view. And it's because of that, and working with my higher self on a daily basis, and my higher self would simply, and to clear up perhaps any misnomers that people might have, to me, the higher self is not something that hangs around you. It's a layering of living fields that are within you, that centers within you and expands out. And the ascension process is you becoming more aware of that expanded sense of self that sits within your center, as another way of saying it. And so it's you. It's a you that is capable of such an advanced and higher aspect of perception that it sees things energetically that we, through our physical eyes, just don't see. It can give you a heads up on things. It can give you understanding on things, wisdom, because it's all you. It's like having, how can you put it? If you want to see it in a sort of a 3D kind of way, I always say that if you imagine just a dropping off a beautiful still ocean, and it plops in, and you get that plop back up, and just at that point you take this camera freeze frame, and then what is sitting at that top of extension is you as a human being, and then this whole massive field experience that's inside that. That's the real you. You're having this sort of fractalized experience where part of the expression of that one ocean is focused just in this little tip, which you call your human form, and everybody else is having a concurrent one with you as well. But you all end up back, in that same living conscious ocean, if you like, which you can call source, or source intelligence, or source love intelligence. And to also clear a little bit there as well, to me, it's interesting because this intelligence comes through, and it is said that love is just a word, but what it refers to is a living conscious presence, an intelligence that knows how to harmonize everything. It knows how to balance everything. It simultaneously knows all of your experience and every other experience of every other human being and living being that's in existence. It's the master field, if you like, in a way of speaking it. And its qualities are the intelligence of compassion, the intelligence of kindness, the intelligence of balance. These are super, super qualities that exist in this source field, or the higher self field that we truly are. And so this is, to me, where it really all comes to. That you asked the question about how my ability to see these things marries into this. And I would say it comes exactly from the higher self and other higher selves of other team members that are around that work with my teams. These beings are very, very evolved beings, and they have been very assistive in understanding. For example, one of the things they were showing me is about the nature of the atom, the internal structure of an atom. When I go in and view it, the way they showed me how to view things on different scales looks nothing like what we've been taught in, mainstream teachings, which I grew up on. I had many years of training in universities looking at it in a particular way. But when you go inside there, it's very different, and the human being most certainly can, in my experience, narrow into the small scale or the large scale. Your conscious ability to perceive is not limited by scale. You can simply choose where and how you want to perceive. But the trouble is, most of us are so used to this idea. We get up, our perception is our eyes, our ears, what we can touch, and that's it for the rest of the day. But when you start connecting with the higher self, you will then start to experience different levels of perception and energy perception that will start to challenge what you think that you are, what you are seeing and experiencing in your life. And I can tell by your reaction there that you've had those experiences. And it's a very profound thing, and it leads you in directions which realize, oh my goodness, so much of what I had been taught has to be undone. I have to let it go, because there is a deeper level of perception which shows a very different picture of what's underneath that veil, that that sort of subliminal type of veil that we operate up here and see everything in our 3D world. But what's under here is truly staggering and magnificent beyond any words.
Wow, I just love how you explain that in your analogies. It's just really resonates, and it's interesting because once you start having those experiences, for me, I didn't realize how much my protective self, the ego, all this was entwined in everything. I had no idea.
Yes.
I was just moving along through life thinking, yeah,
Right.
and then it just shatters the illusion. And then when you
Yeah.
start hearing of people like yourself speaking, that's why there's so much resonance, because it's like, wow, this is really getting broken down at a level where I can finally understand. It's like you have the experience, but it's then trying to make sense of it all through it.
Yeah. And that, in a way, is something that also changes, because when you, like I say, work very consciously with your higher self and work every day to invite your higher self in to begin a deeper sort of opening or a sort of a melding process with you. Because part of the issue is that because of the structural nature of the human body, right down to our, the atomic level, there's a slight incompatibility because of the density of the human form in structure compared to the very, very fluid and vast expansiveness of the higher self. And so learning to sort of, go through that process of having the body go through those, beautiful energetic adjustments and allowing it to be more compatible with your higher self coming in more deeply. Because a lot of people say, oh, I can't hear anything, I don't feel anything. And that's okay. That's quite normal. And for me in the beginning, I went in with like, okay, what am I going to feel when we first do this? I was kind of, I have no idea what's going on here, but the profundity and the clarity with which my higher self came through, I thought, wow, the information that's coming through here of things that I have no experience of before, but somebody else is saying, yeah, that's exactly right. Because part of the training I went through to begin with was learning how to read the energy of somebody else and, get information for them about things they need to look at, heal, or, so on. And the clarity, the depth, and the matchingness of that information to specific, very personal things that were for the person I was working with, because we would team up and we would go back and forth, were astounding. This is stuff she'd never told anyone, but was spot on, And so, and everyone can do this, I would like to make that very clear, because, people say, oh, wow, you can do this. I know you can do it too. There is no difference between what I can do and what anybody else can do. That is a myth, I think, that should be broken, because all it requires is you just, take the conscious effort to do this every day, connect, and that expansion will happen quite naturally in whatever way that your higher self feels is optimal for you. Because your higher self is you. It knows the ins and outs of you. It knows your preferences, what makes you happy, all the other good things. And it's constantly working to try and put things in front of you that are going to satisfy the learning curve that you've wanted to learn in being here. And B, to do it in a very joyful, graceful way that if you just allowed yourself to go through the experience, you'll find, I see why that happened now. It is a learning experience. It's a feedback experience where I get to understand something about myself that I would not have seen otherwise had I not have gone through that experience. So it's the higher self is always in our corner, always has our backs, and is always rooting for us to see better, feel better, expand more, and reach into and connect with the higher self within.
Yeah, beautiful. Have there been times on your journey where, as you're allowing more of that higher self, it's almost like if you're allowing more of the light to fill into
Yeah,
the atomic level and those adjustments,
yeah.
have there been symptoms, challenges in your personal life that have happened from these experiences?
Yeah, we were talking about this before the interview, and I'm glad that you brought that up. It was, a lot of people are experiencing a lot of weird SH1T right now. And to draw from my experience, in the beginning, I felt like my higher self just really threw me in the deep end and said, right, you have a pathway to unfold, but to get there, you're going to have to clear a whole lot of stuff out. There's a whole lot of truck that needs to get removed from your energy fields, your consciousness, the whole 9 yards. And so I went through some very intense experiences of what you might call stuff clearing out, or, people have many different words for it, including purging, that kind of stuff. And it was very intense for me. I got to the point where I don't mind saying that, I was on the floor, curled up like a ball, crying my eyes out, because it was so intense. And so, but coming through that many times, and I got so super, cross at times, like, why is this happening to me? What's going on, because I didn't fully understand things the way that I do now. And I'm happy to share this because I know that a lot of people have been going through their own scenarios. And what my team said to me, like one time I had a bit of a kind of a paddy at one point, and I settled down and, oh, I see it now. Okay, I understand. And they said, do you see why we needed to just let you have your paddy? And then it was all okay, because by going into that state, you finally got in touch with pockets of very low negative emotion you needed to root out, you needed to get in touch with. And they said, do you see that it was your resistance to do that that caused the problem? And so it wasn't the thing itself, it was the, no, no, get down, the pushback, the conscious or mental or emotional pushback that you put back on that stuff to try and squeeze it down like a keg of dynamite or whatever you want to call it, shut that lid on that thing and stop that thing from going off, basically. And I realized, and they kept saying this again and again, my higher self and the teams that my higher self works with, saying that you understand this is the trouble with humanity. Your difficulty is that instead of surrendering to the experience and just allowing the process to unfold, we resist in ways we don't even know we're resisting. You see, we have an unconscious, which they describe, and I've come to learn as, is everything that we have stuck down that we never wanted to look at ever again. It's the SH110 bin, SH1T bin, all the stuff that we wanted to just don't want to look at that. That essentially is is everything we did not want to be conscious of becomes the unconscious, in a way of speaking. And that's a very simple way of looking at it. And so what is happening, in my view, in my experience, and what's happening in my path, is that it is to become more conscious, fully perceptive, you have to root out and let out and literally have resolve for you all of the unconscious stuff. But we've been using such a magnitude of our own energy, whether we realize it or not, to keep those suckers down, and hold them in place out of our experience, out of our consciousness. Or we carry on our day. I mean, it's like they show me this image of like us going over this big ball and carry on about our day, trying to have a normal day. And then we wonder when a piece breaks up out of it. It's like, oh God, where did that come from? What's happening to me now? And essentially, in a nutshell, a very playful way of looking at it, that is my perception of what is happening. And so because we have this plethora of energetics that are coming into us, we get them from solar flares, they're coming from all over the place. They're being generated by people who are holding a high energetic within themselves around the earth. It's all adding together. And what happens is, the way that this energy physics seems to work is that lower energies will always give way to higher ones, not the other way around. It will never be the other way around, because of the nature of how living energetics work. Lower energies cannot exist in the presence of higher energetics. It has to move, it has to dissolve, it has to leave. And so the more you invite your higher self in, and the more that you work on yourself, those little pockets are going to come out. Because it's like, the one analogy they show me is, if you have a glass of water full of mud, and that's just sitting there to the side, yeah, that's good. That's, as long as it doesn't touch me, it's over there, it doesn't do anything. But you start pouring crystal clear water in there, the mud is going to ooze out the top. It's going to spill everywhere. It's going to come out. Okay. And in my experience, what the higher self of each of us does, it does it in little pockets. Okay. A little bit there. Oh, there's some mud. Yeah. Get rid of that. Okay. Settle yourself down. Yep. A little bit more. There you go. Oh, there's another pocket. Get rid of that. There we go. So it kind of does, you feel like you go up and you go down a little bit, and then you settle, and then you go up a little bit more. And then, so it kind of works a little bit like that. And so bit by bit, as the mud from each of us is coming out and being removed, we are up leveling very bit by bit. But the most key component in that, I would say, is be aware of when it does feel so yuck. That essentially is a severe resistance you have for that particular piece coming out. Can you just honor it? Can you just be accepting and just allow it to leave without resisting? Because in my case, my teams and my higher self have been very clear. It really is, they were saying, your resistance to that is preventing it from leaving and making it endure and making it continue. So if you can just hands off and just let it leave and just let it pass, go for a walk, do something else, don't focus on it, just let it leave, it will pass much quicker. Because you are now taking your hands off of keeping it down, and it can leave, and then you can move on to the next phase.
Do you feel that that is what is going on right now on the planet as we speak? That we've been, all of us are having to start to look within, or if we choose to, and are resisting what is wanting to change. I mean, it seems such a tumultuous time at the moment.
Yes,
it's popping off everywhere.
It
but
is,
the mud has
and
to
I
come
would
up.
say Yes, I would say that is very much on the button there. I would say that from my own case and what I see in other people, it very much is that there is this tremendous outpouring of the old. And what the old does is it keeps our perception narrowed in the old. People wonder why the same routines keep happening in their lives again and again and again. Why do I keep creating this same situation with similar people who have the same qualities I don't like, and so on and so forth? And it's because we've had this ball of unconscious, because the way I've come to see it is, as a creator consciousnesses, we emanate energetics, and the quality of those energetics determine the nature of the environment we experience. So our environment is reactive to us, and people sometimes say, well, how come like this everything seems so dense? I mean, everyone's experiencing this. I mean, this is, but the truth is that we have, as a collective human experience, we have been training ourselves to see things in such density, such mechanical modes of operation, that this is literally what we project out there. We literally are projecting our own conscious elements through these filters we have, these belief systems of how things should be, how things shouldn't be, and so on and so forth. And so essentially, that undoing is breaking down belief systems. It's breaking down old, stagnant, stuck emotions, sometimes very traumatic ones, and it's turfing that mud out. And as that comes out, you will see reflections, tumultuous reflections in the world around you, because this is the outpouring of very old, ancient, stuck, for a very long time, energetics have been stuck in the field systems of the earth because of humanity's repeated experiences. And now you're seeing it come out and sometimes play out. Some of the events that are going on around the world right now, these are tremendous outpourings of the crud that has been stuck, unseen, in a kind of unconscious level, or a level that we are not conscious of. Now it's coming out, and it looks bad when it comes out, but when you start pouring the crystal clear water into the mud, when all that stuff starts pouring out, it looks rotten. You think, oh God, what a mess. It's just, everything was great before, and now look, it's all just oozed everywhere. And so in effect, that is what's happening. And so a lot of tendencies such as anger and aggression and other things that have been deeply rooted in people's unconscious, even in pockets and groups of people, are coming out, and they are playing them out, in some of the scenarios we see going on in the world today. So I always say to people that, just the more allowing, try not to get involved with with what's going on. Just if you can understand that it is the purging out of a very old energetic that has been stuck within the many layers of the earth grid systems, humanity's consciousness, for a very long time. And now it is finally leaving. And in some ways of saying it, it's cause for celebration. I know there's a lot of people that are getting hurt right now, but the fact that it is now finally leaving, and the aftermath of this leaving and what is coming in behind it, is cause for great celebration, because that in itself is going to steer humanity on a very, very different path. We're already on that path, but we're just going through the clean out stage. The house is getting cleared, and we're getting ready for a brand new experience, a brand new, so that is something that is most definitely coming in my view, and I believe that is how it is happening.
When did you start to really develop your relationship with your higher self? And you've spoken about as well teams and different higher
Mm,
selves, that different energies that come in and work with you.
yes.
When did all this started coming into your own self through your
Yeah.
journey?
Yeah, and I can go a little bit more specific about what the teams are
Yeah.
as well. And it all started when I started remote viewing. It really seemed, and I believe that was a necessary step that, unbeknownst to me at the time, that my higher self really gravitated me towards, to say, yeah, if you do this, it's going to kick on your intuition. You're going to become aware of a lot of things. You're going to want to know more about these different things, and that's going to get you right on your path where you need to be, so to speak. And so that's why kind of I sort of left remote viewing by the side, and I realized, okay, the real task here is connecting and merging and becoming the higher self field layers within. And what happened then is that, like the analogy I said with the ocean and, different crystals forming different, what appear to be particles. Well, if you imagine that all of existence, that ocean, and different pockets or clusters of, say, solar systems, galaxies, you name it, all being in that one living ocean, if you like, that source intelligence. When you get to a certain level of perceptibility, you start to be able to connect with and understand other high dimensional beings, either via their high selves or them directly. And so I had these experiences where beings that call themselves as beings from the Palladian star systems, the Arcturian star systems, they came along and introduced themselves. And the Palladians were more geared, although they have a very profound energy science and they have very advanced technologies, craft, those kind of things. They were more focused on the healing side, the conscious transformation side, and they were extremely helpful in giving guidance and understanding about self-development and things like that, and what to look at. Oh, you didn't realize you have that there. We can teach you how to clear that, how to move on from that, and so forth. And the Arcturians are similar, but they have such adept conscious technology. Their technology, in my perception and experience, is renowned. They're an incredibly advanced race of beings. And their living conscious energy technology is pretty much second to none. And they were focused more on helping the understanding about living energetics, the living science of energetics, so to speak, and helping those forward as well. And so the more I moved into my higher self and the more I connected on that level with other beings or their higher selves in a similar way, it just started raising up and up and up, and my perception just got better, more expanded, more clearer. And so the connection just became stronger and better all the time. And so, yeah, it was this wonderful discovery, I would say, of, much like you meet people in the street who you might sort of gravitate towards and they say, oh, hey, I do this. What do you do? Let's maybe do something together. It's kind of very similar on that level with them. When they see people developing and the light comes on, so to speak, they may sort of move towards you and very gently just keep reminding, hey, would you like to connect? Would you like to talk? That kind of thing. So there's a lot of people around the world that are experiencing this, and having these connections. And I would say the most beneficial way to approach this, and this is something that they always were very clear to me about, and that is to say that whenever you connect with a being, it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's another human being or them, make sure that you're heart-centered when you do it, and make sure you learn to perceive from the heart intelligence, because they're saying the difficulty with the mind is it's very easily fooled. You can say some really nice sounding words. It sounds really cool and fanciful. It's like, yeah, that sounds really awesome, man. But whenever I've met with them, the first thing they do is say, right, feel our energy. Who are we? What are we doing? What do we want to do? Can you sense that? Can you get a clear picture of us so that you understand who we are, what we want to do, and what we're about? And they said one of the key things about humanity that humanity needs to learn is energy perception and discernment in that way, because you can't fake energy. You can fake words, you can make up concepts, and you can BS, very cleverly and fool a lot of people, but you cannot fake your energy. Your energy emission is exactly the sum total of what you have inside you, any agendas you have, any misdeeds you have, maybe the real thing you want to do. It's all layered together. So you get a snapshot, and I call it like a quantum snapshot. You get an instantaneous image, impression, if you like, or a perception of that person's energy. And you can say, right, I can see this, and this. I'm not too keen on that bit there. Okay, that might be an issue. Or I see, oh yeah, okay, this is quite good. I like this stuff over here. So it gives you a real understanding, a spectral understanding of the energy of the being you're working with, so you can make better choices, who you want to work with, how you want to work with them, what you're willing to do, those kinds of things. And it's so great because I say to people, those advanced beings will always encourage you to do this, because they would like you to be able to see and perceive, just like they do, very clearly. So all the veils are off and you can see a whole spread, and you know who you're dealing with, what you're dealing with, and what you want and what they want. And so that is a big, big part of the package. So I would say to anyone, practice it with your friends, get a feel for their energy. You could even, once you start working with your higher self, say, okay, my higher self, can you give me a feeling, like a snapshot of this person's energy, so I can feel? It's nothing invasive. You're just reading what they're broadcasting. So you're not going around there fishing around or doing weird stuff like that. That's not what you're doing. You're literally learning to read what is already being broadcast to you, and suddenly becoming aware of that broadcast, so that you can put it out in front of you, metaphorically speaking, and okay, I see the spread now. Okay. And it's where I believe is such a good place for humanity to be heading, because then, instead of getting ourselves into tangles or binds with people, we can read their energy and say, you know what? I think maybe I'll just pass this time. I think you're a nice person, but that bit over there needs resolving first before I work with you in that particular capacity, or, things like that, basically.
Have you found on your journey then, as you have healed your own wounds and let that mud come out and move it on, that your connection to this has deepened
Oh,
through that?
yes. Yes.
Because to me,
Yeah.
that screams everything you're doing is inward, and
Yeah.
then that is taking care of itself because you're ready
Yes.
to feel what you need to feel.
Yes, that's a very good point, and it is part of the package. Absolutely. And to me, I always say to people, if you ever find yourself thinking, I'm done, I'm beyond healing, sorry, it's like, that's where you may be catching yourself and being in denial of, unconscious things you still have left to look at. In my perception, and what I mean by that is, I've realized so many things about myself that I thought were dealt with and I thought were cleared and healed. And it only turned out there was many other layers I wasn't yet aware of. And you're absolutely right. As I cleared those off, the let's call them the channel lines, whatever you want to call them, like a fiber optic. The clearer the internals of that fiber optic, the more light, the less impedance for the light to pass through there will be, in a metaphorical way. Okay. And I would say that the people who are most inwardly connected are the people that most do the work on themselves, because you're actively clearing away all of the energetic flow lines, all of the ways in which that energetic flows through you very clearly. And so you're clearing that stuff out and making that availability there. And so you're very right. And at the same time as you do that, your perception naturally starts to enlarge, naturally starts to pick up finer details, because it's like saying, like a cinema screen, you have this projector with pure white light, and in the old school, when a film used to pass through the projector, light, and it would filter the light to make the image turn in, to be what it is. But essentially, it was pure light originally, but it got filtered into an image. Sometimes, if you're watching a nasty movie, it could be a grotesque image, or it could be a very nice image. And those filters are inside us as energetics. So as that light emanates through, it goes through all the filtration, all the filters, and it emanates finally as the sum total of all the mud, all the layers, all the belief systems, and everything else we have inside of us. And so as you clear those ones that you don't like, that are projecting and giving off emanations that are reflected on the cinema screen or your environment, whatever you want to call it, as the things you don't like, as you clear them, they disappear. They stop coming into your environment, because you're no longer emanating that energetic request for them to be there, because you've taken care of the filter, you've changed it. And so that, it can take many, many different forms. And so as you clear that off, not only are you now emanating a much more clearer energy, of a purer energy of the real you are now open to receiving better energetics, and your perception gets better as well. So you're very right there. There is a one-on-one relationship between the two, definitely.
How do you have, I mean, from your own experiences, I'm curious, it's fresh in my mind because I just released an episode with Tom Campbell. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Tom.
No.
He used to be a NASA physicist, and he studied consciousness, and
Ah.
very interesting guy. You'd have a great chat with him, I have no doubt. But yeah, so because I was poking him, and he speaks about the potential of the ability to really transport our consciousness and actually start to explore the universe, and actually
Yes.
go into other physical forms, because we are photons
Yes.
of light at the end of the day. And when I
Yes.
hear
Yes.
these conversations, it just makes me just ponder on, like, wow, like a little kid looking at the stars for the first time. You know what I mean? It's like, wow,
Yeah.
what is possible?
Well, yes. Sorry, had you finished
Yeah,
that? I'm not
please.
interrupting
Yeah, no,
your
jump in. Yeah.
yeah, that's exactly, I totally agree with that. With my experience of remote viewing and what I now call remote perception, because remote viewing involves sort of protocols to collect data essentially, and that can be really, really good. But remote perception, as my team said, they said, we want to teach you another way of doing it where you can have a full experience without some of the protocols that you do with remote viewing. So it's a slightly different way of doing it, but remote viewing is nonetheless very, very fantastic. But in those experiences, and I know from other people who do remote viewing or other forms of it as well, have these experiences. Again, there's no limitation on scale or location when you do this, because remember, what you're really doing is you're accessing the ocean that underlies it all. So you can be anywhere, anywhen, and including, time itself also loses its rigidity when you really go into that very deeply. These are all space itself, the spatial grid system, uh, the way that time works, that the temporal evolution of matter, all those kind of things are essentially energetic constructions, so that things can play out in a certain way. You can have a linear time experience of things and so on and like that. But my experience and my understanding and my perception is that things work very differently in different parts. There are different games being played, different experiences being played out. And yes, the ability to move your consciousness, because your consciousness, you remember that plop, with that almost unending sea, and you're just one little plop. You might think your conscious perception is just here and only confined to what you see in your immediate sort of plop environment, if you like, But when you go in and you start to open up, you realize, oh my goodness, you can be anywhere and anywhen that you wish to be. And that's part of the trick with human consciousness, because we've been so trained from birth and after lifetime to think that what you see is what you get, what you see is all you get. And that's the end of the story. Nothing could be further from the truth. And this, in the part of the ascension process, are part of the veils that we are lifting back and letting go of, which is the veil of limited perception. you know the veil that we are somehow only our main senses, that it's only our environment. We bump into things, it bumps back, and it's very essential basic operating systems of energy. But when you work with your higher self, you realize actually all of that is up for change. As you go deeper and deeper, and you get deeper access to the fundamentals of what creates those densified structures, what creates their behavior and how they operate, you then get the ability to change them. And this is where I believe mixes into ancient past with masters, how they're able to hold their hand out and simply manifest things on their hands. Wow, how do they do that? Well, they had access to the fundamentals of how energetics work because their consciousness reached that level, you know. And so they could just simply have a thought and yeah, there it goes, or, simply create from that space. And the access to this, and this is a very important point I'd like to make, comes from within the well of the heart center. Everybody thinks that the heart is always all lovey-dovey and blah, blah, blah. And it has those wonderful qualities. But the heart intelligence is the most magnificent and most expansive intelligence that you have. We all think and crave mental acuity and mental, intellectual prowess, and having been somebody who's worked in areas that are considered those, I can tell you from my experience that the most profound intelligence you have is right here. And I don't say that lightly, and I don't say that as a woo-woo, airy-fairy statement. I mean that to say that inside the heart is a connection to something called the sacred heart. You have a field around you, which many people refer to as the soul field. And in the center is this very powerful field emanation called the sacred heart. And in the center of that is something called the infinite point gateway. That is your direct entry into the infinite source intelligence, that vast ocean. Every human being has this. No one is an exception. And so that is the key. You know, when people talk about, oh, be open hearted, be playful, joyful, yes, these are all amazing, beautiful ways that encourage you to have the deeper connection within. It's waiting there all the time for all of you. Every answer, every type of transformation or healing you want is waiting right inside there, you know, and it's such a powerful, profound shift because it is profoundly and most centrally self-empowerment. You are reaching back into the well of the quality of infinity within inside you, and there you have access to everything. Nothing is veiled to you, you know, and that to me is part of the ascension process. Ascension is literally, to me, gaining greater and greater access to that. And then so everything transforms inside you and around you to correlate to that. And then suddenly you are this very expansive, very powerful conscious emanation that can do a lot of very cool things and have experiences that are very much of your choosing, not the way that we normally experience them right now.
I love that, mate. Absolutely love it. And I can attest firsthand that my life has transformed when I finally got it, you know, and got out of my head into my heart and work through that daily.
Yes.
Yeah, amazing, mate. Sadly, I'm running out of time.
Okay.
I am absolutely loving this conversation, and I certainly would love to invite you back in the future if you'd love to come on, because I feel like
Yeah,
we've,
for sure.
we've scratched the
That's
surface today, David. But
yeah, it's such a big
it's
topic.
huge, mate. But I really wanted to introduce you to the audience and people get to know you and your work and what you're doing out there. Is
Yeah.
phenomenal and it's greatly appreciated. If people want to find out more, where can we send them, mate?
Yeah, I created a platform for the activations and meditations that help people do this. Most of those are free. I mean, it's an ad-free platform, so we do ask for a subscription to some of the personal development ones that we do, but all the global meditations and the first 15 that start bridging people and get to numbers 14 and 15, which is opening the entry point going into the Sacred Heart and Infinity Point. Those are all free. And it's designed so that as many people as possible can start working on this and start getting this. You can find that on Patreon. It's called Infinite Source Creations. We also have a website which has all of that and some of the devices that we've been creating with the teams called infinitesourcecreations.com. We also have another website where we've been developing environmental devices which create a very powerful living energetic to harmonize your environment, food, devices, water, those sort of things. That's on IC horizontal-infinity.com, but I'm sure you'll put in the links down below anyway so people can find them.
Totally.
But yeah, but all of this is really about, you know, helping people to empower themselves. So big hello to your audience. I hope you've got some fun from this information, and I hope it helps you on your path in whatever way that you find the most joy in doing.
I don't doubt it. It was the perfect place to start the podcast, mate. Thank you so much, and speak to you soon. Thank you, David.
No worries. You're welcome.